Imagine this. You're sitting at a dinner table, smiling politely, holding a fork that suddenly feels heavier than your entire arm. The laughter around you is sharp metallic, and none of it is yours. Someone makes another joke about how you're always so loud and the table roars. You smile again because that's what's expected, but inside a small thread snaps. They don't see it. They never do. To them, you're the noisy one. The girl who laughs too hard, talks too much, takes up too much space. They've decided this is your flaw, and they pick at it the way children prod a bruise, with equal parts fascination and cruelty. Every family has its scapegoat, right? Someone to keep at arm's length so the rest can feel united in their civility. And you've been their target for years. It started with little things. A hand on your shoulder at family gatherings, a quiet shh when you got excited telling a story. A look from your mother across the table when you spoke over someone, even if they had interrupted you first. Cousins would exchange glances when you laughed, eyebrows raised in a silent agreement you weren't meant to notice. You did. But here's the thing. No one tells you when a family decides who you are. They rarely let you change. No matter what you do, speak softer, listen more, disappear entirely, the label sticks. The loud one became your cage. The final straw came on a Sunday afternoon, the kind where sunlight slants through kitchen curtains and dust dances in the air like it has nowhere else to be. You were there because your sister invited you. Just come, it'll be fun. You believed her. But the atmosphere was wrong from the moment you walked in. Chairs shifted, voices dipped like they'd been talking about you before you arrived. Your uncle was the first to say it out loud. We were just saying maybe you should, take a little break from coming over. Just until you learn to keep it down. It was said lightly, like a joke, like they were doing you a favor. You felt the air press against your chest. And in that moment, you realized this wasn't about volume. It never had been. This was about control, about shrinking you down so you could fit inside the tiny box they'd carved for you. And they didn't just want you smaller, they wanted you silent. They didn't expect you to leave without arguing. They didn't expect the calm in your voice when you said, "All right." But tell me, what do you do when the people who are supposed to love you make it clear they don't want you? Do you grovel for scraps of belonging? Do you beg for a seat at a table where the knives are already pointed at you? No, you walk away. You walked away, but you didn't disappear. For weeks you went quiet, not the silence they demanded, but the kind that builds like pressure in the air before a storm. You worked, you saved, you watched. Because you knew something they didn't. You weren't done with them. Not yet. The house next door went up for sale 3 months later. Old Mrs. Patterson had passed, and her children were eager to be rid of the property. You'd walked past it countless times, growing up its peeling white paint, the overgrown lilac bush by the porch. It wasn't perfect, but it was close enough. When you signed the papers, you didn't tell anyone. You moved in on a Tuesday morning, your boxes arriving while they were at work. By the time they saw you standing on that porch, coffee mug in hand, it was already too late. Oh, the looks on their faces. Shock is too small a word. It was disbelief tangled with something sharper, fear, because suddenly they realized the too loud one wasn't going away. You were closer than ever, and they couldn't do a damn thing about it. You didn't wave, you didn't greet them. You simply stood there, letting them feel the weight of your presence. Sometimes revenge doesn't need fireworks. Sometimes it's just existing where they can't ignore you. And in the weeks that followed, you became a ghost in their walls, the one they'd tried to erase but now had to see every single day. The first week in the new house tasted like resolve. You scrubbed nicotine from the kitchen ceiling, aired the curtains on the porch, and pruned the lilac that had grown wild, like an old grief. From the upstairs window you could see their backyard, the family table, the place where your name had become a punchline. You watched them gather on Saturday plates, clattering your mother in her soft sweater, your sister gleaming in sunlight like a coin lifted for worship. There was space at the table. There had always been space. They just never said it for you. They pretended you were a miracle they had never prayed for. They pretended you were furniture. Your name lived in their throats, but no one called it. Instead came the sideways looks, the way people glance at a closed door, as if sound might leak through it. Your uncle raised his glass and said something that made them laugh, all heads turning toward your porch. You didn't flinch. You watered the fern and let your silence pour like a cool drink over hot stone. You know that tone, don't you? The one that makes you feel like a child who colored outside the lines, the tone that says you are being handled. Your family might not use words like exile, but they use rules and smiles and the delicate art of not inviting you. It starts to tighten around your lungs. You consider texting your sister to stop the circus. Then you remember who trained as ringmaster. On Sunday, a note arrived beneath your door. No signature, just block letters. Respect quiet hours. Your laugh startled the window. You hadn't played music. You hadn't had guests. You had eaten noodles over the sink because you were too tired to find bowls. Still, someone needed to remind you what cage you once lived in. You placed the note in a drawer with a manual and a warranty, a relic of a system that no longer applied. You painted the exterior a gentle gray and replaced the rusted mailbox. The contractor waved from his ladder and you waved back. It was ordinary, even pleasant, until your mother appeared on the sidewalk with a glass dish covered in foil. Old habits kicked like a reflex. Your hands lifted to accept the offering to make it easier to be the good daughter who still believed food healed things it could not name. Then you saw it, the way her mouth tightened before she smiled, the calculation behind her eyes. A mother can be a sanctuary, but she can also be a gatekeeper. "It's just lasagna," she said, as if that explained the years between you. "Thank you," you replied and did not invite her in. The hesitation in her hands lasted one heartbeat, then she let go. The dish was warm and heavy tomatoes, an apology and control. You held it like a script you were done reciting. Inside you ate standing at the counter, fork scarring the foil. You wanted to cry. Instead you tasted the salt and thought, so this is what it feels like to feed yourself while refusing the performance. The next morning, you returned the dish to her porch with a note of your own. "Thank you for the meal. I am keeping to myself. Please respect my space. No flourish, no plea." You were done auditioning. They tried other tactics. Your sister posted a photo of the family barbecue with the caption "Quality over quantity." You almost laughed. You could feel the hunger in it. The golden daughter thrives on the mirror. She needs you to look and envy. She needs her crown to glitter. When you do not look, the crown becomes a burden. You did not look. Your brother-in-law, always the diplomat, stopped you at the curb one afternoon. "It's just that people are sensitive here," he murmured. "Thin walls, maybe be mindful." He wore concern like a borrowed sweater, too big, not his. You tilted your head, mindful of existing. He blinked, flustered. "No one is against you." You could have listed the messages, the eye rolls, the group chat you were quietly removed from. You could have pulled receipts until the table broke. Instead, you smiled with the kind of gentleness that makes people uneasy. "I am being very mindful," you said, and walked away. You felt his gaze on your back, confused, as if he had expected either tears or rage. They never plan for a woman who chooses neither. Here is what no one prepares you for: how much power is in ordinary rituals. You hung new wind chimes that sang softly at dusk. You planted rosemary and thyme along the fence, the scent lifting into the evening like a whispered prayer. You waved at neighbors who had nothing to do with your blood and were kinder for it. You slept with the window cracked, the lilac folding in like a good dream. Each choice stitched your life to itself again. Each choice said, "I live here. I belong." But you were not the only one making choices. Sudden complaints appeared on the neighborhood forum about late-night laughter and disruptive visitors. You could prove you had none, but proof is not the point when people want a story. They wanted the old script with your role clearly labeled. You could almost hear your uncle pushing the narrative. You could almost see your mother not stopping him. "Tell me, does it make your teeth ache too? The way respect works, like a bargaining chip in families that measure love as obedience. Have you felt how they swap truths in the dark, then hold them up like pearls in daylight? You start to wonder if you imagine things. You have not. You are simply awake in a house that used to be theirs in spirit, but is yours in fact. A single sound cracked through the heat one evening. Not a shout, a sob. It floated from their kitchen window. You set your book down and listened without moving, and something inside you went still. It was your sister. The tone was strange. Not fury, not theatrics. Something rawder. You stepped outside into the lavender air. They had always kept their dramas private from you, as if you were a contagion. Now the wall between the houses felt tissue thin. You did not go closer. You did not eavesdrop. You watered the rosemary and let the ground drink. But you knew a shift when you felt one. A soft animal of truth was moving through that house, and it was going to break furniture. You looked up at your window and imagined the light you would leave on tonight, not to beacon anyone home, to see yourself clearly in the glass. By the next week, the air between your porch and theirs had changed. You could feel it in the way your mother paused before closing her blinds, in the way your sister's laughter now carried an edge brittle like glass about to fracture. They were quieter, but not out of courtesy. It was the hush of something unraveling. You'd been in this role before, hadn't you, the unwanted witness, the one they accused of stirring trouble when all you did was stand too close to their truth. That's what they hated about you most, not the volume of your voice, but the fact that it carried things they worked hard to bury. You saw what was happening behind their Sunday smiles. You saw the splinters. It started small. Your brother-in-law's car parked overnight at his friend's place more often than at home. Your sister's smile frozen for a beat too long when the neighbors asked how they were. And then the package. A plain cardboard box left on their porch. Your mother took it inside before anyone could see, but you caught the flash of her eyes meeting yours, sharp like the snap of a trap. Whatever was inside wasn't for you to know, which meant, of course, you already knew enough. Secrets live in the speed people move to hide them. You kept to your rituals. Coffee on the porch, tending the rosemary, smiling at the postman. It's a strange kind of power, isn't it, when you refuse to flinch? They expected you to throw stones over the fence to press your ear against the wall to show some hunger for the scraps of their private life. Instead, you acted like the calm was yours to keep because it was. One night, just past midnight, you heard it. A sharp crash like a plate shattering. Voices rose, not the muffled hum of a family dispute, but something hot naked. Your sister's voice was ragged, shaking the air. "You made me look like a fool." The reply was lower, harder. You couldn't make out the words, only the rhythm, the thud of something heavy being placed, not thrown. A pause, then the sound of a door slamming. The next morning, your sister was on her porch in sunglasses, watering her petunias, like the world hadn't heard her heart split open 12 hours earlier. Your mother stood behind her in the doorway, pretending to look at the street. You stepped out with your mug, the one with the tiny chip at the rim, and sipped your coffee slow. You didn't say a word, but you didn't look away either. She saw you. And for the first time in years, she didn't have a smirk or a barb ready, just a flicker in her expression, something you couldn't name yet. Not regret, not shame, more like recognition. Later that week, the pattern shifted again. Your mother knocked on your door. You opened it to find her holding a bag of lemons from her tree. The scent filled the hall. "They're ripe," she said. Just that. No lecture, no request to keep your voice down. You thanked her and set them on the counter. But you knew these gestures. They were offerings, not olive branches. A way to say, "I am still the one who gives, you are still the one who receives." A way to keep the hierarchy intact. Here's what they don't realize: you've stopped playing that game. You sliced those lemons open that night and let the juice run over your fingers, thinking of all the times they'd decided what you could have when you could speak, how much space you could take. You thought of how easily they had turned you into a shadow when it suited them, and you thought of how shadows disappear the moment you turn toward the light. 2 days later, you saw him, your brother-in-law moving boxes into the back of his car. He caught your eye and looked away so fast it was almost comical. Your sister wasn't outside. Your mother's curtains didn't twitch, but you could feel the story writing itself without your help. A shift in alliances, a storm changing direction. That evening, your doorbell rang. You opened it to find your sister standing there, hair loose, eyes tired. No makeup, no audience. She didn't ask to come in, just looked past you into the living room like she was trying to measure the quiet inside. I didn't realize you'd actually stay," she said finally, like it was something impossible. You met her gaze. "I told you I live here." For a moment, neither of you moved. Then she swallowed hard, as if she was about to say something that would scorch her tongue. Instead, she shook her head and muttered, "Never mind." She walked back across the grass without looking back. And you just stood there, the night air wrapping around you like a promise. You didn't chase her. You didn't need to, because whatever was breaking over there had nothing to do with you anymore. And yet you were the one they would feel every time they opened their windows. You closed the door softly. This was only the middle of the story, but you could feel it, the ground shifting under all of you. And you knew when the cracks widened, you wouldn't have to lift a finger. The following days brought a stillness that didn't feel natural. It was the kind of quiet that came after glass hit the floor, not because the mess had been cleaned, but because everyone was tiptoeing around the shards. From your window, you saw less movement in their yard. No impromptu barbecues, no lawn chairs set out in the afternoon. The Golden Daughter's life, the one curated for neighbors and relatives, was suddenly off display. She was indoors, more blinds half drawn, the sound of her voice muffled when it did appear. And then there was your mother. She had started lingering in the garden longer than usual, trimming the same rosebush twice, pacing by the hydrangeas with a phone pressed to her ear. When she spoke, her voice was low, tight, like she was aware someone could be listening. Maybe she thought you were. You weren't. Not in the way she feared. You didn't need to overhear. Whatever was unspooling inside their walls was already spilling into the air between your houses. One afternoon you stepped outside just as your sister was dragging a trash bag to the curb. It was heavier than it should have been for garden waste. She didn't notice you at first. Her focus was on the bin, the effort it took to hoist the bag in. When she turned and saw you, there was a flicker in her eyes. Not the old contempt. Something closer to disarmament. She hesitated, then said, "I'm getting rid of things." "Spring cleaning," you replied, though it wasn't spring. Her gaze darted to your porch, then back to you. "It's a lot harder than I thought." You let the words hang there because you knew better than to rush in. People don't confess when you pry. They confess when the silence offers them nowhere else to go. That night you heard raised voices again, shorter this time, sharper. Then the slam of a door, footsteps on pavement, and the unmistakable sound of a car pulling away. You didn't look. You stayed in your chair, the book in your hands open but unread, and let the sound pass through you. By morning, the car was back parked crooked in their driveway. Your brother-in-law was nowhere to be seen, but your sister stood on the porch smoking. She hadn't smoked since her early 20s, at least not where anyone could see. When she spotted you walking to your mailbox, she didn't hide it. "You're probably loving this," she said flatly. You stopped the envelope in your hand, a meaningless prop. Loving what? She exhaled smoke slow, like she wanted to fill the space between you with it. "Us falling apart." You tilted your head. "I didn't build that house," you said softly, "and I'm not the one tearing it down." Her jaw tightened, but she didn't argue. That was new. She stubbed out the cigarette and went back inside without another word. You could have felt triumphant. Years ago, you might have. But watching someone drown in the same water they once pushed you into doesn't feel like victory. It feels like confirmation of who they are, of who you've become, and of the impossible bridge between the two. Still, their discomfort grew more obvious with each passing day. Your mother stopped making eye contact altogether, shuffling past your porch with her grocery bags like she was late for something. The neighbors noticed too. You caught Mrs. Alvarez from 2 houses down, giving you a curious look as if trying to piece together why the perfect family was fraying at the edges. And then the loudest thing yet happened, nothing. An entire week went by without so much as a slammed door. No late-night arguments, no notes slipped under your door, no performative barbecues, just a vacuum of interaction. That was when you realized they'd shifted strategy. If they couldn't shrink you with criticism, they'd try to erase you with absence. It almost worked, until the invitation arrived. A cream-colored envelope slid through your mail slot, handwritten in your mother's script. Inside, an invitation to a small family dinner, the kind that had once been your battlefield. No reason given, no acknowledgement of the months of frost between you, just a date, a time, and the unspoken dare will you come back into the fold. You sat with it for hours, the paper warm under your palm from the heat of your indecision. Because here was the truth part of you still wanted the version of them that had never existed. The one where you were welcome, where your laughter wasn't ammunition, where belonging wasn't conditional. But another part, the larger, steadier part, knew what that dinner would really be. A test. A reset of the old hierarchy. A reminder of who had the power to invite and who had the obligation to accept. You thought about the house you'd bought, about the mornings with the lilac spilling through your window, about the way your life had begun to take shape without their hands rearranging it. When the day came, you left the envelope on your kitchen counter unopened since the first time you read it. The lights in their dining room burned bright that evening. You didn't look over. You baked bread instead, filling your own kitchen with warmth and the smell of rosemary. They wanted you at their table to prove they could still set the rules, but the truth was already too loud to ignore. You had your own table now, and it didn't need their approval to be full. 2 days after the dinner you didn't attend, the knock came. Not a polite tap, a steady, insistent pounding that rattled the glass in your front door. You opened it to find your mother. Her coat was buttoned wrong, her lipstick uneven. There was something frantic in her eyes, but her voice when it came was sharp enough to cut. "You embarrassed me," she said. You leaned against the doorframe. By not showing up. By making a statement, she snapped. By letting everyone see you think you're too good for us. That almost made you laugh. Too good for them, as if they hadn't spent years convincing you were never good enough. "I wasn't making a statement," you said calmly. "I just didn't want to go." Her breath caught like the simplicity of that was more offensive than any insult. People like her live on the currency of guilt and obligation. Without it, they're bankrupt. She straightened, smoothing her coat like it was armor. "Your sister's going through a lot. She needed family around her. Family that doesn't kick her out when she's too loud." The words slipped out before you could decide whether to soften them. Her eyes narrowed, but she didn't deny it. We were trying to help you. She stopped herself, the sentence heavy with all the labels she'd used on you before. Too loud, too much, too difficult. You didn't step aside to let her in. You didn't raise your voice. You just looked at her until she had to look away. Finally, she muttered, "I hope you're happy here," and turned to leave. "I am," you said to her back, and for once it was entirely true. After she left, the quiet in your house felt different, not fragile, fortified. You realized you'd been bracing for her approval your entire life like a soldier waiting for orders. And now there was no war to fight unless you stepped onto their battlefield. Still, the shifts kept coming. Your sister started walking past your house in the evenings, not in avoidance, but almost deliberately. Once she slowed near your gate as if she might say something. She didn't. Another time she lingered at the lilac bush, touching the blossoms the way you used to as kids. One Saturday morning, you found a bag on your porch. Inside, fresh bred honey, and a note in her handwriting, not flowery, not apologetic, just 2 words, "Thank you." For what you wondered. For staying out of it. For existing as proof that someone could break away and still breathe. For being the mirror she didn't know she needed. You didn't reply. You left the bag in your kitchen and went about your day letting the questions stay unanswered. But the next week the sound returned, not the arguments, but laughter. Real laughter, unpolished, coming from their backyard. It startled you not because you missed it, but because it didn't have the edge it used to. It wasn't aimed at anyone. It was just there. You stood at your window listening. It was your sister's voice, lighter than you'd heard in years. You didn't know what had changed inside that house, but you knew this. You weren't the villain in her story anymore. Maybe you never had been. Maybe she just needed someone to survive outside the walls, to prove it was possible. One evening, as the sun was bleeding into the horizon, you saw her again. This time she stopped at your porch steps. "Do you want to come over for coffee sometime?" she asked, almost shy. You studied her face. The golden daughter had cracks now, not flaws, but openings. Maybe you said and you meant it. Because the difference was clear. Before any invitation was a summons, a test, you could fail. Now it was just a question. One you had the right to decline without losing yourself. You went inside and closed the door softly. You realized you no longer needed revenge to feel whole. Existing on your own terms was the sweetest retaliation of all. That night you stood at the window and watched the light fade from both houses. The lilac swayed in the breeze. The rosemary's scent drifted through the screen. And you thought about how far you'd come from that Sunday afternoon when they told you to keep quiet. They had wanted you small. Instead, you'd rooted yourself deeper than they could reach. The woman who knows her worth doesn't beg, she watches. Then she rises.